Hey everyone, in this video we are going to learn about how we can write our own implementation of function once, which is a function provided by Lodash library. What it does is it takes a function and run it only once. So let's see how we can do it. So let's say we have this function print once and all it does is just console.log print only once. So if I run this function multiple times, you'll see it will print it multiple times as expected. But what if I want to make it run only once? So no matter how many times I call this print once function, the output console.log print only once should only be printed in the console only one time. So how can we do it? So the simpler way is to use a closure. So what we can do is create a closure here. We'll call it let called equal to 0. We'll be returning another function from here. So return function, and inside this function we'll check if called is equal to 0. If this condition is true, then only run this particular piece of code, and at the end we'll update the value of call so that whenever we call it one more time, this condition will be false and nothing will happen. So let me call this function here fn equal to print once, and instead of calling print once again and again, I'll call this fn method here. So if I save this and run it again, you'll see print only once is getting printed only one time. To check if it is actually working, we can write an else case here, and inside it here we can write console.log running more than once. If you save this, you'll see for the first time it printed print only once, and for the second and third time it printed running more than once. But this was a very specific scenario. What if we want a generic functionality? We want a function that takes one function and in return give us another function which will only be executed one time no matter how many times we call it. So for that we have a solution. So for that, Lodash provides us with a function called once. What it does, it takes one function as an argument and returns another restricted function. And if we call this function again and again, the value of the first invocation is returned. So what does that mean? So let's understand this with an example. So in order to use Lodash in our code, I have added the CDN for Lodash library here. And inside our JS file, what I can write is simply const fn equals to underscore dot once and pass the print once function here. And if I call this fn function now multiple times, if we go to the console, refresh, we'll see it is only get it printed only once. Now what does this statement means? Repeat calls to function return the value of the first invocation. So what does that mean is if I'm calling this function again and again, this fn function, and the function that is taking this print once function was returning something, then the return value, the first return value will be printed again and again. So let me show you with an example. So let's say we have a value above here called a, which contains a number 1 in it, and here inside the print once function I'll increment the value of a by 1 and I'll return the square of a. Now if I go back to the console, okay, it's still not printing. Okay, yeah, so since it's returning something, so we need to console.log here. So instead of just calling it, we need to console.log the returned output. So now if we save it again and go to the console, you will see that only 4 is getting printed again and again. How? Initially the value of a was 1, it gets changed to 2, and it returns 4 in case of first invocation. In case of second and third invocation, if it was a normal function, it should have returned 9 and 16. Why? Because value of a would have been increased one by one again and again. But since we are using this once function, the result of the first invocation, which was when the value of a was 2 here, so the output was 4. So the result for the first invocation was 4. So no matter how many times I call this function, the result of the first invocation will be printed, which was 4. So let's see how we can write a polyfill or our own implementation of the once function. So let's start writing. We'll write a function. We'll call it once, and it will take two things: the function and the context. Inside this function, I will declare a variable called ran, and as the once function from Lodash returns us a new function, so here also we'll be returning another function. Inside this function, I'll check if there is some value present inside this fn function. So what does this fn function points to? It points to this print once function, which we'll be passing it as an argument. So if the value is present, what we'll do, we'll run the function and store the result inside our variable ran. So to run the function, to execute the function, we'll use the apply method. So fn dot apply will pass the context, and if in case the context is not provided, we'll use this as the context. We'll also provide the arguments if in case this return function was expecting. Now after we have executed this fn function and stored the result returned by this function in the variable ran, we'll override the value present in the fn variable to null. Why we are doing so? So since we are returning this function from this once function, the variable fn here will act as a closure. What does that mean? So in the first execution of this return function, this fn variable will points to the print once function. So if fn condition will be true, because there is some value present inside the fn variable, so we'll run the function, we'll execute the function, passing it all the arguments if it's expecting any. We'll store the result returned by that function in the variable ran, and then override the value of fn to null, so that on the second or third or any number of execution after that, there won't be any value present inside this variable fn, and this if condition will not run. So what will happen outside this if condition will return the value inside the variable ran. So if I call our function here, so const once demo equals to once, and pass the print one function to is as an argument. And now if I call the once demo function, and console.log it as well, since it will be returning the square, this written a into a as a result, so I need to console.log it. So console.log let me repeat it 2 or 3 times. Yeah, if I save this and go to the console, you'll see that print only once is getting printed only one time, and the result is 4, 4 and 4, because we have called the once demo function 3 times. So that's how we can write our own polyfill or our own implementation of the once function. Link to this code will be present in the description if in case you want. So that was it for this video. Thank you for watching.